everyone, and welcome back to my channel. This is Glossy Philosophy. My name is Jansen Binman, and today you are tuned in for a book talk. So today we are talking about almost two books, but basically the same thing. We are talking about Infinity Net, the Autobiography of Yayoi Kusama. Who is Yayoi Kusama? And what is the other book? The other book is a children's book, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. Yayoi Kusama is one of the most important artists of the 20th century. And I bet you know her, and I bet you know at least some of her work. If you've ever done macaroni art at school, or if you've ever seen a pumpkin with polka dots, if you have maybe wallpaper with a bunch of polka dots all over the place, that has been inspired by Yayoi Kusama's work. So let's kind of get into where did she come from and why we should know about her, and if this book is interesting for you to read, as well as the children's book. So let's get started. So let's talk about where Yayoi Kusama comes from and why she becomes an important figure in the art world. So Yayoi Kusama is from Japan, and she grows up with a family that doesn't really suit her needs, and there are some kind of horrible things that she is asked to do, and also that she experiences, which basically covers her mentally the rest of her life. And you can definitely see it in her artwork, which in her book, in her autobiography, she talks about in great detail, which is very brave of her, I think. So she decides at a very young age that she needs to be an artist, and this is the only way that she can express herself. Also, because of the things that have happened to her as a child, she starts to kind of suppress them, and then they metamorphosize themselves into things like going into a field of flowers, and the flowers begin to talk to her, or finding some pumpkins, and the pumpkins either turn into faces or they also talk to her. So she's dealing with quite a lot of things at an early age, which continue throughout her entire life. But back to the art. She wins competitions in Japan, and she desperately wants to go to New York because she thinks that's where she's going to make it, and that's where people are going to understand her art. She writes a letter to Georgia O'Keeffe. Well, she writes many letters. Georgia O'Keeffe answers her back and actually is able to start selling some of her artwork, which is incredible. And she has some of the letters in this book. So eventually Yayoi makes her way over to New York City, and it's not going well. People are really interested in what she has to say, but it's definitely a starving artist situation. So somehow she's able to break through, and people are calling her a genius and so avant-garde. And then she's creating things like her macaroni art, where she puts macaroni on everything from clothing to chairs to wall to canvases, and just covering everything in macaroni. Why does she do this? That is the really interesting thing. She does it because she can't imagine people consuming so much processed food, and for her it takes the representation of macaroni. And so whenever Yayoi is trying to deal with something, she has to repeat it over and over and over again until it becomes less scary or just less overwhelming. And you will see this in other forms of her art. She's really well known for infinity rooms, where the entire room, all the walls are mirrors, so everything is repeated over and over and over again, including the viewer. And inside of the rooms could be maybe the macaroni art, some other art, or it could be like pumpkins with polka dots. And basically you're just like consumed by polka dots when you walk into the room. I've never personally seen it, but I've seen photos and it looks amazing. So she's doing things with macaroni, she's doing things with polka dots. Polka dots become kind of like her calling card for a long time. She starts off with these huge canvases and she'll just like for hours on end, sometimes she'll forget to eat, sometimes she'll forget to sleep, just continue to paint the same thing over and over again. And she calls them an infinity net. And I think the background of this is an infinity net. And you'll notice something else that she's very into is putting layer upon layer of the same thing in front of each other so that they basically disappear and you become kind of invisible or as one with whatever it is. So for example, on this cover, we have the infinity net in the background. Yayoi Kusama has a polka dot dress on, and then in front of her, she is sitting at a polka dot table, and it looks like there's some kind of a bowl that also has polka dots. So her idea is if you create something polka dots and then you wear polka dots and everything else around you has polka dots, then it just kind of disappears and you're just kind of lost in this infinity net. So it's kind of beautiful and also a little unnerving too. So her work often will balance that beauty and unnerving sense. Now, you can't talk about Yayoi Kusama, especially this particular book, without mentioning her happenings that occur in the late 60s mostly. I'm not really going to go into detail about the happenings because as we continue to talk about this book, it is a very adult subject that she expresses in her happenings, and I just feel like we could get caught up in that, and I don't want this book talk to become all about the happenings. It was also very uncomfortable for me to read about, and I think that the art that she creates after the happenings is so much more relevant and so much more inspiring than that happening series that she did for a while in New York City. So after the happenings, after the polka dots, after the macaroni, she goes back to Japan because she's just not doing well mentally. And she knows she needs help, which I think is incredible that she somehow recognized that she needed help. I read this book maybe a year after I read Vincent van Gogh's biography, and he just had no clue that he needed help. His family was always checking him in. It wasn't until a lot later that he would say, I really need to see somebody. So the fact that she was able to step back, especially when, she could wake up one morning and be covered in paint and polka dots and have no idea how that happened. So we're dealing with some pretty serious mental illness here. She checks herself in to a mental hospital in Japan, and she's been there ever since. And she continues to create, she talks about her day, what a typical day is. And she basically wakes up, she sees her doctors, and then she creates and she paints and she does all these other things. And she eats dinner and she goes to sleep, and it's just repeat. And there's a quote on the back of the book that says, no matter how I may suffer for my art, I will have no regrets. This is the way I have lived my life, and it is the way I shall go on living. So Yayoi Kusama really believes that she is meant to do this, and this is the only way that she feels she can communicate to the world and also get her point across. She's not really a speaker. She's definitely someone who can express themselves very well, or she tries to through her art and her installations. Now, you might be hearing some of this information and thinking, how is it possible that she has created such like a wave? Well, when she was doing the happenings in New York, she became like an international sensation. Those were so avant-garde and pushing the limits so much that she really just became a big deal. Her infinity nets and some of her watercolors, which I believe are at the Modern Art Museum in New York City, those are kind of like the beginnings. And then the infinity rooms and the installations after the happenings, the installations become a major, major deal. And she wins more awards and gets more international acclaim, and people start to really understand what she's trying to say, and they really get swept up in Kusama mania, she calls it, which is really interesting. I even remember a really long time ago seeing a magazine cover of Yayoi Kusama with George Clooney in one of her infinity rooms. Now, I knew who George Clooney was, like this was a really long time ago, but I didn't know who that artist was. But that is still in my brain. So like that's what happens when you see one of these infinity rooms or a picture. It just kind of sticks with you because it's so different and it's so unusual to experience, I'm sure. And it's even very different and avant-garde to experience as a viewer of just seeing a picture. So that is Yayoi Kusama. The next thing I want to talk about is, should you read the book? Maybe the good and the bad, and then also kind of talking about the children's book that is also available. So, first of all, let me say that every year I like to read at least one book about an artist. It doesn't matter to me if it's contemporary or whatever. I just think that art is really interesting, and I think it's important to know because really well-known artists and just art in general is able to express what's going on in society, what's going on within ourselves in a different way than music, which I'm much more familiar with, and other kinds of art can do. They can take it in a different way. If anyone is interested in kind of pursuing their knowledge of art, especially contemporary art, there's a great YouTube channel from the Modern Art Museum, the MoMA in New York City. I will link it below. It is fantastic. And then there's also on PBS, there is, I think it's Art of the 21st Century. It is so good, especially last season, just kind of blew me away. I will see if I can link it below, but China I thought was like one of my favorites. It was so good. So, should you get this book? Should you read this book? I'm going to say don't buy it right away unless you're really already into Yayoi Kusama, because especially if this is maybe your first of all, if this is your first artist read, I would start with somebody else because there's a lot of heavy, heavy stuff that's going on in this book. This book I almost didn't finish because it became so uncomfortable for me to read some of the things that she was very truthful about. So let's just kind of talk about that a little bit. When she is discussing the happenings that she did for a long time, it was a very strange part of the book because you are rooting for this artist who, like, obviously you can see is very talented, and then she goes off and does this thing that makes a lot of people very uncomfortable, but she also gets a huge, massive following of people. So, and then she describes everything in great detail, but it's also as if she's not really, like, she made these happenings occur. And it's like she's viewing it from far away as an observer instead of someone who's actually partaking in it. And to be fair, it does seem like she was exactly that. She, like, had these things happen in public and she didn't want to partake in them. So it's a little bizarre that she continued to push for the happenings to occur and yet didn't really want anything to do with them. I also think that she took a major thing that was going on in the world, which was the Vietnam War, and she condensed it into something really small and understandable. And I don't think that was the right path, and I don't think that you can condense something like war into something really teeny tiny. I just don't think that it works like that. I had to remind myself that she was also, and throughout this entire time, really struggling with her mental illness. So I'm not saying that she didn't have some interesting ideas, but a lot of them, I think she was really off. And again, it just made me feel very uncomfortable reading about them and just the intensity in which she felt like it needed to happen. So there's a lot of that in here. However, at the end of the book, I'm so glad I kept reading, because at the end of the book there are so many wonderful things that she talks about, and I kind of feel like this book needs another book to follow through with all the amazing artwork that she's done since then, because a lot of this book is about her beginnings and her early artwork, and some of it is just bananas. And some of it I understand where she's coming from, but it's still a little bananas. And I felt like this book was really trying to help us understand where she was coming from, because she did get a lot of bad press with some of her installations and some of her artwork, which, if you decide to read it, you'll probably understand why. So, should you read this book? It's up to you. I think it's really important to, again, know about art and artists, and she's still alive. I did double check that a few days ago. She's still alive. She's still creating. So that's amazing. I can't think of any other artist that has made such a huge impact in the art world and in culture and fashion and everything, except Yayoi Kusama, who is still alive. So I feel like you should at least know the bare basics of who she is and where she comes from. And even in the Vogue, I just saw an advertisement in a Vogue from this year where it was basically a polka dot infinity room with a shoe with polka dots, and I was like, Yayoi Kusama strikes again. It's amazing. Her influence is still happening, you guys. So for that, I think it's really important to at least read some of the book or familiarize yourself with her a little bit. If you start reading it and it makes you feel uncomfortable, I say skip a good portion of it and get to the end, read that, and then look at some of her other artwork that she's done. So for that, I'm really not sure. If this is interesting to you, go for it. If it's not, I say skip it. If you are interested in Yayoi Kusama in modern art, and you maybe want to introduce your children to the lighter aspects of Yayoi Kusama, this is an excellent book. So this is Yayoi Kusama, Covered Everything in Dots and Wasn't Sorry, and this is by Fausto Gilberti, and he's written a couple other books about controversial artists, and I think he did a great job. He really took that autobiography that she wrote and made it kid friendly. The illustrations in here are very kid friendly, and he does not go into detail on things that would make you feel uncomfortable. Is this for a 2-year-old? Probably not. Is this book for like a 5 or 6-year-old? Yeah, and definitely for 8 and above, I would say. But again, Yayoi Kusama covered everything in polka dots, macaroni, and some other things. So like, how cool would it be to read about her and then do some macaroni art? Either of things, covering things that maybe your kid is afraid of, or things that they really enjoy. I mean, I did that with my kids and they thought it was so fun, and I thought it was really fun too. So there is some really interesting ideas behind her artwork that happen at like the elementary level and beginning art level too, and just kind of messing around with different things, like the idea of taking something that feels uncomfortable or that you don't understand and trying to turn it into something, anything. It doesn't even have to be beautiful. Just like doing something with it, working with it, trying to understand it. I think that's a very interesting idea. So yeah, that's kind of my book talk about Yayoi Kusama. I know it's kind of like, so should I read it or should I not? So I'll just leave you with this thought. If you are interested in art, read it, give it a chance, rent it from the library. If you're not, maybe check out Claude Monet, but he has some dark stuff in his past too, so there you go. I hope you enjoyed this book talk. To be honest, I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about this book, but I really think, again, it's important to learn about artists and where ideas come from and not shy away from things that make us feel uncomfortable, especially when there are other ideas that are really interesting. So I'm kind of discarding the ones that make me feel uneasy, and I'm embracing the ones that I can really connect with. So I will do this again next month, and next month we are going to do Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, which is fabulous. And that will be the November book talk. Again, usually I do fashion videos every Wednesday and beauty videos every Friday, so stay tuned for that. And then Saturdays are kind of just like a really quick chit-chat blog about either skincare or fashion or beauty, kind of whatever it is on my mind. So again, thank you for watching. If this was helpful or enjoyable at all, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I will see you very soon for some kind of video. Bye!